The night my parents finally walked into my home, they stopped so suddenly in the doorway that the jazz music seemed to pause with them. My name is Eva Monroe, and I was standing on the terrace of my cliffside villa holding a glass of champagne when I saw their silhouettes appear against the glow of the entryway. For a moment, the only sound was the ocean below and the stunned breath my mother tried to swallow. They weren't supposed to be here. They had refused my invitation, told me they had something far more important to attend, something that made my housewarming nothing more than a small, forgettable event. Yet here they were, frozen beneath the chandelier, their eyes climbing the sweeping staircase, the glass walls, the glimmering coastline behind me. They had expected to find a cramped little condo, the kind of place you drive past without even noticing. Instead, they were staring into a world they never imagined could belong to me. I didn't walk toward them right away. I let them look. I let them feel the weight of everything they had dismissed. My mother's hand tightened around her clutch. My father blinked like the room was some kind of mirage. Dylan hovered behind them stiff in his tailored suit, as if he'd just stepped out of his own celebration because he had. I took a slow breath, smoothing the front of my dress, and finally stepped closer. Their faces shifted, trying to rearrange shock into pride or confusion into something polite. But they couldn't quite form the expression they needed, because none of this matched the version of me they had carried in their heads for years. I stopped a few feet from them, lifting my glass slightly. "Welcome," I said. "You almost missed everything." The truth was they already had. The call happened 3 weeks before that night on a Tuesday so ordinary it shouldn't have mattered. I sat on my balcony in Seacliff Bay, the sun tinting the coastline gold, rehearsing all morning for a moment I hoped would sound calm instead of desperate. When my mother finally answered, I stood as if I needed the strength. She sounded distracted, breathless. I told her I wanted her and Dad at my housewarming. I tried to sound casual, though it meant everything. Her reaction held no excitement. "Oh, honey, that weekend Dylan has his recognition banquet. We already committed?" Her softness felt like padding for the blow. I told her it was important I had bought a home. She hummed like she was acknowledging a weather report. Then my father came on steady and certain, explaining that Dylan's event was significant and they'd send something and visit when things slowed down. When I tried again, he gently cut me off. "It's just a housewarming, sweetheart." My grip tightened until the phone edges dug into my skin. I said I understood even though I didn't, and ended the call before my voice cracked. For a moment only the ocean spoke its rhythm, feeling almost mocking. I looked at the balcony, the quiet strength of the life I'd built alone, one they'd never bothered to ask about. They still pictured me in that old apartment doing work too small to matter. As the sun dipped lower, the truth settled in. They weren't coming because they didn't think there was anything worth coming for. Something inside me sharpened, refusing to let that be the end. Once the call ended, memories rose like tide water dragging up old debris. They always began in our Ohio home, where everything revolved around Dylan. He was the golden boy, long before law school teachers adored him. Neighbors predicted greatness, and my parents basked in his orbit. Their pride cast a shadow I grew up inside. I was the quiet one, drawn to sketchbooks and outdated design software. My mother reminded me screens wouldn't pay bills. My father called me imaginative, stretching the word like he was hiding pity. At dinners, questions for me felt like afterthoughts, still drawing, still doing those little projects. I was the faint outline behind my brother's bold portrait. I left Ohio after college for Portland, chasing something I couldn't name. I took any design work I could. Logos, graphics, small websites, living mostly on cheap noodles in a tiny apartment. My parents visited once. They brought Dylan. Portland is where everything shifted. I met Marco through a tiny startup project. He looked at my work like it was more than a hobby. He saw vision. After the project ended, he suggested we start a studio, something bigger than logos. It sounded impossible, but he said it like certainty, and for once someone spoke to me like I wasn't an afterthought. We grew slowly, then steadily, until companies I'd admired from afar were calling us. I reinvested everything, and built a life nothing like the one my parents imagined. But I never bragged, never tried to compete with Dylan. I assumed they'd eventually ask. They never did. That realization hit me as I leaned on my balcony rail. The ocean felt endless. Home felt small. They didn't underestimate me out of cruelty, but out of habit, and that hurt most. Something in that habit had to break. A week later, I flew back to Ohio for my grandmother's birthday, hoping something would feel different. It didn't. The same dim Italian restaurant, the same seating arrangement, the same polite but distant greeting from my mother. Dylan hugged me with the breezy tone he used for weather updates. Dinner played out as always, Dylan at the center, my parents hanging on every word about his latest case. When they turned to me, it was with surface-level prompts. My father casually said he hoped I was finding my footing out west. I said things were good. He nodded, satisfied. Then came the moment I wouldn't forget. My father stood to toast my grandmother, then effortlessly shifted into praising Dylan's upcoming banquet, his dedication, his success. The table clapped. Even the waiter paused. And of course, he added with a smile meant to include me, "We're proud of you too, sweetheart. Still figuring things out west." Awkward laughter rippled. My mother gave a sympathetic smile that made it worse. My grandmother squeezed my hand under the table and whispered, "Some people don't notice what's right in front of them." I didn't defend myself. This wasn't the room for that. Instead, I unlocked my phone beneath the table, opened the event planner's email, and hit confirm. The quiet chime felt like a vow. If they refused to see me, they would one day realize what they'd missed. I wasn't going to shrink for them again. Back in California, the air felt sharper, like it meant to wake me. The morning after returning, I stood in my living room with the ocean glowing through the glass walls and saw the villa as something new. Not just a home, but proof of everything I'd built. The cliffside rooms reflected each choice I'd made. The tall windows framing the shifting tides. The clean kitchen built for long hours, the studio lined with sketches old and new. Marco arrived with coffee and grinned. "You're underselling this place. One photo and people will assume you run a Fortune 500. He wasn't wrong. I was the one who'd kept everything small private enough that my parents barely knew me. He told me Harper from West Coast Living had responded she loved our work and wanted to feature us in a piece on women-led design shaping West Coast tech. The idea thrilled and terrified me. It would be public, permanent. I agreed anyway. Over the next few days, the villa transformed, soft lights draped along the terrace, a jazz trio, rehearsing by the pool, florists filling the rooms with peonies and eucalyptus. Every detail echoed the life I'd carved out of late nights and risky decisions. One evening, Ruby called from Portland, furious, after reading the family group chat, and my mother calling my villa a cute little place. She vowed her whole studio was coming to the party to celebrate someone who had always shown up for them. After the call, I stepped onto the terrace. The lights glowed in the dusk, the ocean stretching calm and steady below. Something settled in me, not anger, but certainty. They had decided my life was small. I was about to show them how wrong they were. The night of the party arrived with a stillness that felt like held breath. I stood before the mirror, smoothing my dress as the villa hummed with preparation, the catering staff murmuring the jazz trio, tuning the sky, deepening into velvet blue. Guests arrived just after 7, designers, founders, creative directors. Their laughter filled the villa. Some wandered through the rooms with reverence that made me blush. Harper arrived with her photographer and asked to shadow me. I surprised myself by saying yes. Ruby burst in with a storm of Portland artists hugging me so hard I nearly stumbled. For the first time in years, I felt surrounded by people who truly saw me. I was by the pool discussing a project when the valet approached. Nervously, a car had arrived with no RSVP. My stomach tightened. When I turned, 3 silhouettes stood beneath the chandelier. My parents stepped inside first, dressed like they were entering a ballroom with Dylan trailing behind. My mother's eyes widened at the high ceilings and glass walls. My father blinked, stunned. Dylan tugged at his cuff, uncomfortable. I didn't rush. I let them stand there in a world they never imagined belonged to me. Finally, I approached, my heels echoing. My mother tried to speak, but faltered between awe and apology. "I didn't know you meant this," she whispered. I raised my glass. "You didn't ask." Before they could answer, Harper appeared smiling, asking if she could photograph us on the terrace. My mother paled. My father swallowed. Dylan shifted. And in the quiet beneath the noise of the party, one certainty settled deep inside me. They had come too late. But they were going to see everything now. In that moment, the noise of the party faded, and a quiet certainty settled inside me. They had come too late, but they were going to see everything now. My parents didn't stay long after that moment in the foyer. They followed me onto the terrace once Harper stepped away. but even with the ocean stretching out beneath us and the party glittering behind, they seemed smaller somehow. Or maybe it was the first time I wasn't shrinking beside them. My mother stared at the horizon as if the water held answers. My father cleared his throat twice before speaking. Dylan lingered a few steps back, hands in his pockets, wishing he were anywhere else. My father finally asked how I managed all of this. The house, the work, the people. His voice wasn't accusatory, just stunned as if discovering a room he never knew existed. I told him about the studio, the clients, about Marco, and everything we'd built. I let the truth stand on its own. My mother whispered she wished I'd told them sooner. I said I wished I had too, but for years it felt like it wouldn't have mattered. It was the closest we'd come to honesty in a long time. Neither of them defended the past. The silence between us was heavy but clean, and I felt something loosen. I wasn't waiting for their apology anymore. They left quietly 20 minutes later. No scene, just a soft goodbye, and their footsteps fading as the party carried on. Dylan stayed long enough to say he was sorry for not seeing things sooner, and for the first time I believed him. I told him he didn't need to fix anything tonight. Then he followed them out. When they were gone, the terrace seemed brighter. The band slid into a warm melody, guests moving like constellations across the villa. Ruby found me at the railing and handed me champagne. She didn't ask. She just bumped her shoulder against mine and said the house looked even better, filled with people who cared. A week later, Harper's article went live. The photos caught the villa from angles I'd never seen, making it look both vast and intimate. The profile told our studio story with clarity and respect. Reading it, something inside me unfurled, not pride exactly, but recognition. Messages poured in from old classmates and people I hadn't heard from in years. Dylan texted again, telling me the article was incredible, and that he wanted to visit properly. My parents called that evening. My mother's voice was softer, like the article had shaken something loose. She said they were proud. She said they were sorry. She said they hadn't realized how much they'd missed. I listened. When she finished, I told her I needed space, not out of anger, but truth. I said I was done living small so they could stay comfortable. She cried quietly, but didn't argue. After the call, I stepped onto the terrace. The sky had folded into dusk, the air smelling of eucalyptus and salt. I wrapped my hands around the railing and let the calm settle. I wasn't waiting to be seen anymore. I had learned to see myself. The week after the article felt unusually quiet, not empty, just peaceful enough that I could hear myself again. Each morning I took my coffee to the terrace, watching fog drift across the water until the sun burned it away. The ocean didn't care who apologized or who didn't. It just kept moving steady and sure. I found myself matching its rhythm. My parents kept their distance, maybe sensing I meant what I said. Dylan's messages were softer, and I replied when I wanted to. No bitterness, just boundaries I'd needed for years. The villa felt different too, not because of the party, but because something inside me had shifted. I walked through the rooms with ease, realizing I no longer felt the need to prove anything. This home wasn't a statement, it was simply mine. One evening I opened the sliding doors to let in the breeze carrying eucalyptus from the hills. Ruby had left me a small painting, bright and abstract, and I'd hung it by the staircase. Every time I passed it, I felt the presence of people who'd believed in me long before the article, long before the villa. I thought about calling my parents just to see what might grow in the quiet between us. But I didn't. Healing doesn't always mean rushing back. Sometimes it means standing still long enough to know where you want to go next. The sun slipped behind the horizon, turning the coastline amber. I leaned on the railing and let the moment be what it was, simple, steady mine. No performance, no waiting for permission. The truth is, I never needed the party to prove anything to them. The party proved it to me. I built a life I'm proud of, one that fits me, one that doesn't shrink or apologize. Whether my family ever fully sees it or not, I finally do. And that's enough.